All right, welcome back to another episode of the Cashflow Chronicles podcast, everyone. Today, I have a very special guest for you guys. So, I think we're going to do a slightly different style of podcast today where I'll really just be giving him the floor and let him share his wealth of knowledge with you guys. Before I do that, let me just give you a little bit of background. So it's kind of cool how once you're in this community, a lot of people you want to and need to know, need to be talking to, become more accessible because it's just the type of conversations that we're having. So I first came across Mr. Brent Carlson here by listening to him on the Money Multiplier podcast by Hannah Kessler. And he spoke about trusts, asset protection, taxes, and to be honest with you guys, a lot of shit that went right over my head. Um, you know, I knew if I wanted to continue on this journey of building wealth and leave a lasting legacy for my family, I needed to do what the wealthy people are doing. And honestly, the majority of wealthy people out there, they have their shit in order. They're working with tax professionals. They have their assets protected. They have a good team of people around them showing them how to really keep as much of their money as possible, legally, of course. So I reached out to Brent. We've spoken multiple times. He's actually helped myself and my wife, along with some family of mine, who I referred over to him, set some things up to help us do just that, to protect our legacy and to keep as much of our money as, again, legally possible. So you guys are in for a real treat today. I'm going to shut up here in just a second and let him take over and start educating you guys. But before I do that, just a little bit about Brent because we've spoken a couple times. I know he's a happily married man, father of four boys, which I'm sure is a handful. Probably easier than four girls, though. He graduated from BYU back in the day and has been in the corporate financial world doing what he's been doing for the past 20 plus years now. He's currently the owner and CEO of Corporate Capital, which is based out of his home state of Nevada. So I am happy to have you on today, man. I really just wanted to give you the floor and let you educate people about what it is that you do
Okay.
and the value behind the services that you offer because I know uh, it's not something that's talked about a lot, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed a whole lot more. So the floor is
Well,
yours.
thank. Well, I appreciate that, Shawn, and thank you for everyone who is listening to this and following Shawn because he mentioned a couple names earlier that I've been able to work with over the years that have really changed, obviously my business and my life, but more importantly, your guys' lives, making sure that you're structured properly, making sure that we're putting as much money back in our pocket at the end of the year, make sure we're taking advantage of infinite banking concepts and just everything that goes along with it. So, but before I get into some of the particulars, a little background about my company. My wife and I formed Corporate Capital back in 2013. So we've been in business for 11 years. Just celebrated an anniversary December of last year. We do everything from helping set up corporations and LLCs. We do those in all 50 states. We do focus primarily on a couple states for certain reasons, which I'll go over with you guys today. We also educate our clients and help them understand as a business owner, you're required for your financials. So, whether you're keeping track of those on an Excel spreadsheet or you're actually using a QuickBooks software, you're responsible for your financials. You're responsible to make sure things are in order each year in and year out. So we actually have a service where we have a bunch of bookkeepers, accountants, CPAs, enrolled agents that for those of you who actually need help, where you're just buried, you can invest your time elsewhere. A lot of our clients, it makes sense for us to just take over that bookkeeping and accounting. And when you have a firm that does that, whether it's Corporate Capital or your team that you have in place, you should be meeting with them throughout the year, quarterly, definitely before the end of December 31st, because once that date comes and goes, there's not a lot of tax planning strategies we can implement. And again, we're very aggressive and we're big believers. Shawn said it, keep as much money in our pocket as possible and don't overpay. And a lot of people just overpay because it's the lack of education. So there's things that you can do within your company for those of you who have corporations or LLCs, or for those of you that could potentially set up side businesses. And then the third thing I'll cover today will be the estate planning. So we do a lot of revocable living trusts. So every single person that is watching this video, I've done a lot. I've done more living trust for people in their 20s than I have my entire career the last few months, just because people are starting to understand, they get it, they understand the importance of this document. And hey, we're all working our asses off. Shawn's spending time doing this podcast to educate you. I'm spending time to educate you because we want to grow that wealth. We want to have that generational wealth. However, if we don't plan appropriately and if we don't have things in order, then the government's laid out guidelines that makes us go through probate, hire attorneys, and all of that can be avoided with proper structure. And so, Shawn, I'm going to cover all that with him today. And then, as I told and mentioned to you, the founders of the company, Jamie, Flo, and myself, are going to handle each consultation for your group. Like if they have questions, if they want to call, there's no strings attached. We don't bill by the hour. We just want to have that opportunity and answer the questions for this audience. So if anything particularly relates to you, feel free to call. Matter of fact, we have a phone number. It's 855 410 7667. Again, 855 410 7667. So that number actually rings, and it rings to those three principles I mentioned. And so we will actually be the one to handle those. So I just wanted to point that out for those that had questions, because it's not a cookie cutter approach. You're going to learn a lot, but then you're going to have a lot of specific questions. Okay. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about LLCs. I'm very passionate when it comes to LLCs. And if you see behind me here, I have hundreds of record books here and outside in my bullpen area. So a lot of you who have a corporation or an LLC have probably never seen a corporate record book like this. A lot of you probably formed your LLC online, which is okay. I'm glad that you're incorporated, don't get me wrong. But if shit hits the fan, if we ever get sued, if we get audited, they're going to want to see our corporate records. So when we form a corporation or an LLC for a client, we make sure that they have all their documentation, from their corporate seal to stamp their certificates. You'll see it has their minutes in here. It has the operating agreement. And then what a lot of people don't have, which I'm sure half of the audience, you don't have these green membership certificates. So these green membership certificates, these are the stock certificates for your business. This denotes ownership of who owns the company. Now, you should have an operating agreement that also discusses that. But within your record book, these certificates, especially if it's a partnership, if Shawn and I are 50-50 partners, I want this record book filled out, and I want 50 units issued to me, and I want 50% issued to Shawn. So those of you who have partnerships, it's very important to make sure those corporate records are up to date. Now, many of you are probably a single member LLC. Single member LLCs do not have as much requirements as a corporation. So a lot of times you can waive your annual meeting minutes, but there's still a few things that you need to do, whether it's on a state or federal level, to stay in compliance. So every year, as a registered agent, which our company is, we help our clients renew with the state. We make sure that they are in compliance with the state. And then every year, we'll help them either waive that meeting minute or actually hold the minutes of the annual meeting. So now if we get that lawsuit, or if we get that letter in the mail, they want to see our corporate records. Now we have everything to support us being a corporation or an LLC, as opposed to an alter ego that we filed online to set up a business. And so, again, I like to make sure, especially as a business owner of multiple entities, I do the yearly meeting minutes, I do the compliance, I just make sure that if I do get that knock at the door, I'm not scrambling around to put together my corporate records. So I challenge all of you to look at your corporate records, see what you've done since you've set it up. And let's take a look, because it's very easy to clean up and catch up for years that you haven't been in compliance. Now, for those of you who are looking to set up new corporations or LLCs, We do have the ability to form those in all 50 states. However, and Shawn can tell you, we form most of our entities out of Nevada or Wyoming for private businesses. Now, if you're going to be a publicly traded company or if you're going to have investors, foreign investors, a Delaware C Corp still makes a lot of sense. So again, depending on your situation, it may make sense to be a Wyoming or a Nevada entity or possibly Delaware. Now, the reason we go to those states is because there's the corporate veil protection is undeniable. So if something happens in your business, let's say some of you watching right now are a Florida LLC and you have a rental property in there. Your Florida LLC can actually be sued and they are allowed to pierce the corporate veil in Florida, Utah, California, which means that not only can they sue the business and the asset in that business, but now they can turn around and sue you personally. So for a lot of new businesses, what we'll do is we actually, even though I'm headquartered here in Nevada, I own my building here in Nevada, I set up more Wyoming LLC, Shawn, than any other state because Wyoming will give natural privacy. So they don't even put your name on public record as the organizer. So now you don't have to blast your name all over this company. And there's no state or corporate taxes there. So by doing this, we're not causing our clients any issues or double taxation because there's no state or corporate tax in Nevada. There's no state or corporate tax in Wyoming. So a lot of times, yes, you might be running a landscaping company in Virginia. We might have to register that Wyoming LLC to do business in Virginia. But now, if something happens, a rock goes flying out of a lawnmower or someone gets hurt, you have insurance, you have your business, it deals with it. But by having this structure and by simply adding a Nevada or Wyoming piece, it gives you that peace of mind of knowing that you have a brick wall between your personal life and business life. And states like California, states like Utah, for example, Utah, very friendly. I'm traveling there tomorrow for speaking engagement. Nicest people in the world. However, they have a lot of lawsuits and their corporate veil gets pierced because of commingling of funds. And that happens a lot and it's not on purpose. But because you commingle funds, it's one of the reasons you can pierce the corporate veil in that state. And Wyoming, Nevada, unless you're committing fraud with the intent to commit fraud, your corporate veil cannot be penetrated. So it truly gives you the best separation. So for those of you who already have an LLC, we can look at setting up like a holding company in a state like Wyoming or Nevada to own the shares of your current business. So now if that business gets sued, the actual owner is a foreign entity that doesn't allow personal litigation. Or we can look at possibly doing a complete restructure where we close out the business in Florida, open up a new one in Wyoming, and then register it to do business where you live. Now, again, I'm talking about really strong asset protection strategies. If you're not worried about asset protection strategies and more about the tax flexibility, then I'm okay with you being headquartered in your state because if you have an LLC, your LLC can be taxed however you want. So again, some of you might be buying notes, some of you may be buying real estate. I had a call earlier, a guy had several Airbnbs and rentals in that entity. And so you can use the LLC for any business. You can use it for real estate. You can use it for private lending, consulting. You can use it in whatever capacity, but it gives you that reassurance. And even if it's private lending, which a lot of people are doing in these groups, I still encourage them to do that through an entity. So now every investment, everything that you do has separation. And when you have that separation, if you put all your eggs in one basket, that basket gets stolen or sued, all of those eggs are at risk. So if you have separate businesses, I would encourage you to have separate LLCs for the different businesses if they have separate liability. Now, those of you who are in real estate, which I'm starting to see a lot more real estate in this portfolio, those of you who are in real estate, you may live in a state that recognizes what's known as a series LLC. There's 19 states roughly, Indiana, Illinois, Wyoming, Nevada, Delaware, to name a few. Those states will allow you to form one LLC, Shawn, and you can have as many properties underneath that LLC umbrella as you want. So like Latane in Tennessee, we just did properties A through T. So we took like 19 properties and we set up 19 different series or cells within one LLC. Why is that important? They only have to do one annual renewal with the state. They don't have to do 15 or 19 different filings. Or if you're in California, the franchise tax is $800 a year. You and I both know that. It kills people. So that's why California won't recognize a series LLC for you to protect 18 pieces of property, because they want their $1,800 per LLC, or their $800 per LLC. So there's different ways around that depending on where you live and depending on, the businesses you're running. Now, if you're running completely separate businesses, we would have to have separate LLC, Shawn. We can't use a series LLC for something like that. The series LLC is really truly just used for real estate, and someone came up with it, and most states adopted them because it makes sense to be able to have one structure and separate the liability of each property. But again, there's only certain states that allow that. So those of you who have real estate in your name, we need to get it out of your name. And the ways you can do that is possibly by having an LLC, or in many cases, a land trust is a suitable option. And a land trust was designed specifically for real estate, where you can put the property into this revocable trust and then have it owned by an LLC. So now you can have 3 or 4 properties separated in California and not have to have 3 or 4 separate LLCs and then have one managing it. So again, it just depends on your structure. It depends on what your goals are. If you don't have an LLC, I would always recommend having that consultation to start that Wyoming piece to use for your investments, your notes, or possibly even using to register in the state that you live. Now, what I love about LLCs, and I could talk about this stuff forever, with my 20 years experience, I've learned so much. I continue to learn. So a lot of you don't feel like you have to understand everything about an LLC for you to set it up, because that could cause analysis paralysis, and that could really cause you a lot in taxes and liability. Your LLC actually could be taxed however you want. So a lot of people don't know this. They think if they're a single member LLC, they're going to be taxed as a sole proprietorship, which you're going to pay that 15.3% self-employment tax on a sole proprietorship, single member LLC, or even a 1065 partnership. The only way to get around the 15.3% is when your LLC or even your C Corp is taxed as an S corporation. So at corporate capital, I'm an S corporation. So I'll pay myself a reasonable salary throughout the year, take bonuses, reimburse expenses. Then at the end of the year, whatever money's left over, that comes to the owner as in a form of a K1. But if you're making thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, every $100,000, Shawn, of an S corporation tax status, you're saving $15,300. So now, not only do you have an LLC that gives you the separation, the peace of mind of knowing that this is truly a business or an investment opportunity, has nothing to do with my family, and on top of that, I can have this LLC taxed however I want. So once we form the LLC, we do a walkthrough and we give them this corporate record book. And then at that time, we'll go through with them. What are your goals? Like, what are you making? What do you project for 2025? Because again, we have until March 15th every year to make that determination and that election. And if we're late, we have to fill out a form and ask and beg for permission. So if it does make sense for the S election, depending on your guys' income this year or last year, you may want to change that tax status. And that is a conversation that usually takes 5 minutes. And I would be able to tell you, like, absolutely, we need to shift gears here and have this entity taxed to your benefit, because you do have that flexibility. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. Now, with your LLC, there's so many things you can do that are fun. There's so many different tax planning strategies that you can implement that I've been implementing for years. One of them I'll share with you is the Augusta Rule. So the Augusta Rule is where it started back in Augusta, Georgia, back in the early days with the golf tournament. The good old boys got together, a lot of money, a lot of property. They decided, hey, we're going to be here for a little while. This should be a write-off. So they decided to propose it. The IRS adopted it. And there's a cap on it of 14 times a year. And if there wasn't a cap, I'd do it 50 times a year, to be honest with you, Shawn.
Oh yeah.
But 14 times a year, you could pay yourself $2,000 per meeting. So the national average to go to like the Bellagio or Del Frisco Steakhouse or Ruth Chris or Empire State Building is about $2,000. So we're allowed as business owners to actually pay ourselves to have a meeting at our home, which again, I've been implementing for 6 years. So roughly that's 184, whatever $1,000 that I've been able to collect and have my company, corporate capital, get a dollar for dollar deduction. That money goes back into the Carlson family. I don't pay a penny of that as income. I don't even put it on my tax return. And my business gets a dollar for dollar deduction. Like this is stuff all of you should be doing if you're incorporated. And if you're not incorporated, it could be a good reason for you to get incorporated to take advantage of some of these things depending on your income.
Yeah.
The
That one
other
was huge for me that you had explained that to Amanda and I earlier, and we're like, oh, like I had never even heard of that before. And just like you said, that's an easy 24, $28,000 that you could be putting back in your pocket if you just had that education.
Yeah, and I tell clients like if you're working with the right firm, their services truly should pay for themselves because there's a lot of strategies and things that you can do. They brought out new medical reimbursement in 2024 that we did continuing education on. So we're very familiar with the write-offs. Paying the kids is another one for those of you who have children under 18. I've been doing it for many years now. I like to give the example of my 17-year-old when he went and bought a little Lexus in St. George. We just pulled the money out of his bank account and it didn't go through dad. So instead of dad only having 7,000 or 6,500 of the 10K to spend, he had dollar for dollar because we paid him the amount to keep him under the threshold of filing the taxes. So we have hundreds of clients that implement that. Again, if it makes sense, the revenue's there. There's no reason to give that to the IRS when you potentially can be putting that back into your family. So I really would challenge people to look in the mirror, have the conversation, and even ask your tax person, do I qualify for the Augusta Rule? Can I be paying my kids? And if they say, yeah, I'd be concerned. I wouldn't be happy. I had one client call me last week and he said, my CPA said I would qualify for it. And he said, how about we learn it together? And yeah, exactly. Same thing. Why didn't you tell me? But then he didn't know enough about it. So he's like, let's learn it together. And the guy's like, I'm not going to learn it together. And then he ended up using us for, that part of the strategy. But if you're not having these conversations, if they're just plugging in numbers, which I hear a lot, you might as well go to H&R Block and save yourselves $800. If you're really looking for tax planning strategies, if you're looking for some guidance, then you need to have that quality firm. Now, one thing I will tell you, because Shawn's a client, he's referred a lot of clients to us. We work in teams of two here. We really feel it's important that you guys have communication throughout the year. We haven't raised our tax fees in 11 years. We just have a flat price to do a tax return for a business or for an individual. And year in and year out, we charge that. But with that comes the support. So it's like a gym membership. If you want to go every day, if you want to go a couple times a month, you can utilize it however often you want. But we don't bill by the hour because we want to implement and teach you guys some of these strategies, peel back the curtain, look to see, are you being taxed properly? What do your previous tax returns look like? And that is something we're actually willing to review for you as well. So if you've ever had that doubt in your mind or wonder, am I doing it right? We'd love to put a second set of eyes on that. And as I committed to Shawn, based on our relationship, there wouldn't be a charge for that or consultation. It would just be something we'd look at to say, hey, you got a great team, your structure looks good, keep it in place. Or if there's any red flags, obviously we'd want to look at that and say, this is something that we've noticed. If you were to make this change, it would save you approximately X amount of dollars. And we always want to put those in emails and in the portal that we use. So our clients can always go back and reference that, speak to their spouse or make their decision on their own based off of hard facts. And instead of just having a conversation, we like to put it all in writing to say, this is what's actually going to be the difference if you were, to make these changes or possibly have your LLC taxed as an S corp, or even a C corp. I have an LLC that's even taxed as a C corp, Shawn, that I use on a fiscal year that ends in October, and I'll kind of use back and forth between my businesses for tax purposes. So again, there's a lot of tax strategies out there. Some of you may or may not have a side business, but for those of you who have an LLC, just make sure that you're looking at those deductions and some of those low-hanging fruit tax strategies if you're paying taxes into the system. If you're not, we might not be able to implement, a lot of this. But again, to recap, I really would strongly recommend you looking into states like Nevada and Wyoming. And I definitely would look at your revenue. If your revenue is starting to exceed six figures, that's where the S corporation really needs to start having a hard look taken at it. And a lot of times it can even be a little less than 100 grand. But if you're at that amount, like the last two real estate agents I've talked to have both been single member LLCs making $250,000 to $300,000. And by us converting them to an S corp, literally saved each of them between $40,000 and $60,000 that they would have paid again in 2024 if they wouldn't have come to us before the end of the year. So as a business owner and as people who want to grow our wealth, that's why we're all doing this. That's why you guys are on this channel. We want to help support that through the IBC policies, how you can use that money. Are there any tax ramifications for doing something a certain way? And before you make that decision or pull the trigger on anything, I would encourage you to call your team or my team and say, this is what I'm looking at doing. Does this make sense? And then at least what the consequences are financially, if there are any. And so that relationship, that communication, Shawn and I text weekly. We talk quite often. Has a lot of questions because again, as a newer client, that happens, and that's why we want to give that membership so you feel comfortable to call and ask those questions because again, all of your guys' situations are similar, but at the same time, they're very, very, very unique. So,
Yeah,
um,
one thing I really like about you guys, and again, I don't think many people get into this lane of learning this information, is you as a company, you're very proactive instead of reactive. Like, I think when people are thinking about CPAs and stuff and taxes, it's oftentimes looking back instead of looking forward. And I think your guys' is all like, all right, well, let's plan this forward. What can we be doing to, just like all the stuff you're talking to make sure that we're putting as much of that money back in your pocket as possible. And then the small expense that comes with it. Like I had sat down and talked with Amanda about this. I'm willing to pay two, three, four, five, whatever $1,000 for whatever you're doing to save me 10, 15, 20, 30 grand. Like I think anybody out there would give me five and I'll give you back 25 that you would have given away.
the IRS, yeah.
I mean,
And it's interesting you bring that up, Shawn, because only one time in my career we had a gentleman where he was going to save $14,000, and we had to help implement the strategy because some people can do it on their own. You can do the Augusta or pay the kids and do the payroll reports, but most people just want it done right. It's not their specialty, so they have us do it. So yeah, we break it down like you're going to save 14 grand. We might have to charge you 3 grand to implement the strategy, but it's going to take us 20, 30 hours to do the meeting minutes, the compliance documents with the IRS. I don't have a problem if people try to do it on their own. We'll still educate them and say, hey, this is something you could do. But the main thing is know that the option is there. Know that the IRS should not be getting an additional 12, 16, $25,000, and here's how to avoid it. And we will have that conversation with you. And like I said, I have had one client that just paid the bill, the IRS, and then I've had a couple clients that will do the research and kind of try to implement on their own. I usually don't recommend that, but at the same time, as long as we're taking advantage of the tax deduction, that's what I want to educate you guys on and make sure that that's being done. So.
Definitely.
Um, I want to talk real quick about so with the LLCs again, Wyoming, Nevada. I really would encourage you the next one you set up, at least have a consultation, hear the reasons why there's no stronger asset protection, and worst case scenario, it costs you a few $100s a year to have a Wyoming LLC that you renew because you're still going to have your fees in Florida or Virginia or wherever you live. So why not just have a Wyoming entity that gives you all this protection? Yeah, we pay a couple $100 to keep it active in Wyoming, but technically it's operating in your guys' home state, which gives you, again, a corporate veil that cannot be penetrated. So to me, that is priceless, and I'd like to look at that with my clients. Now, once you form an LLC, or if you've already had an LLC in place, I touch on this briefly just because I'm proud. So corporate capital, even though we do a lot of corporate structuring, we do a lot of accounting, bookkeeping, we do a lot of estate planning. We stayed with the baby because that was our name back in the day. We helped a lot of clients build credit. The problem with that, though, as a business owner, as you can imagine, when you advertise credit and money, you get a lot of people that call that really are in a position to hire you for their services. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We know we can help people, but I don't want their expectations to be out of whack. Um, a lot of times it takes 3 to 4 months to build the credit. So we really only offer the credit to our existing clients just because of the expectations. But I like to share this story. So when I started my company back in 2013, I built my credit and I was able to get a $40,000 loan, which we turned into like 1.3. It was a great first year. I was able to pay back the loan within a couple months with no early prepayment penalty. And I was able to do that through corporate capital. So I built my credit score, my DUNS number on my EIN. And then when I applied for the loan to start my business, I did not have to provide a personal guarantee, which was awesome. So if we didn't make it, which 11 years later, we're obviously, in a pretty good position. But if we didn't make it, they weren't going to be able to come after my home or my personal assets because I didn't personally guarantee it. So those of you who have existing businesses, you'll probably notice if you were to look up a credit score, you don't have one. And that's because you actually, like Shawn mentioned, you have to be proactive. Business credit is way different than personal credit, meaning they don't report the good, bad, and the ugly. They only report what the hell they want because they're not regulated. So there's a few vendors out there that will give your business a line of credit where you can order your paper towels and toilet paper, and instead of going to Walmart or Amazon, you could use the business for a few months, order these supplies, pay it off in a net 30, and then after 30 to or 60 to 90 days, we guarantee in writing that you'll have an A credit score, 75 or higher, which is like an 800 FICO score. So now, Shawn, when clients go and apply for credit cards or lines of credit, they can actually put that their business has a DUNS number. They can show them a copy of their score. And in many cases, that is going to put them in a position to get some alternative funding. But again, I like to be straightforward with people because relationships are everything. Even though you might have the best credit, if you don't have a lot of activity or tax returns, it's still going to be difficult, to get the funding that you may want, but it's a starting point. And now it's another option as your business gets older, this brand develops, this company has more history, more payment history, tax returns. It's just going to put you in a prime position that you may be able to do the same thing I did, whether that's buying a building or buying $50,000 worth of computers or phones. But your LLC should protect you. It should benefit you tax wise, and it should be a resource for you when it comes to lending. So I wanted to touch on that briefly because that was kind of the corporate capital story and how we started out.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's I did not know that. So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and then that's why we stuck with the name. We have CCI accounting and tax. We have MJ audit and consulting. We have different businesses that specialize specifically because a lot of people when I meet them at events, they'll come up to me and they'll ask me for money or they think we're a lender because of our name, and then I explain, the history of the company and what we do. But there's a lot of people out there that probably don't have the best personal credit that want to look at building their business credit. And I actually have someone that also helps on the personal end as well. Now, Shawn, if you have people, obviously, this is your group, but I have a relationship with a gentleman that also helps with some personal credit repair. That does a very, very good job. Do you have someone like that you refer your clients out to?
I do not have a personal credit guy. Nope.
Okay, so we have one that is a tax client of mine, and I met him recently. Feel very confident. I know a lot of us. I used to have some real shitty credit back in the early when I bought my first house in '08. You can imagine what happened to me in 11 and 12, and my credit took a hit. And the good thing about it is the business credit is just completely separate than personal credit, and a lot of times you don't have to sign a personal guarantee once that's built up. So now, like my wife's Denali, we lease, it's all in the name of the business, and I don't have to sign a personal guarantee. So let's say a $1,200 a month payment, I'm not sharing that for how much money I'm spending, but I'm sharing that because they're taking a chance, giving me a lease of a vehicle, uh, $100,000 vehicle, no personal guarantee. I could go turn that bad boy in tomorrow, and then there's nothing they can do about it because I didn't have to sign a personal guarantee because my business had enough credit history. So some of you probably have been through a process before. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but these are all the advantages of what an LLC can do. It protects you, it gives you tax advantages, and it can also give you some options for funding. All right. Um, the third thing I would like to cover and is the estate planning. We do a lot of revocable living trusts. Again, I don't care how old you are. I'm 43. Shawn, how old are you, sir?
I'll be 33 here now.
33. Okay. So, I don't care if 33, 43. I've had clients in their 20s, which has really impressed me the last couple of weeks, just people that get it. It's so important for us to have a revocable living trust. And a lot of you are going to be doing, infinite banking and policies, and a lot of you are looking to set up generational wealth. And in order for you to do that, we have to be proactive. We have to have some planning in place. And so there's two trusts that we specialize in. We do multiple trusts, but the two trusts that are very common is the Revocable Living Trust, which all of you, again, I don't care if you're married, if you have kids, if you have a house, a car, a bank account, if you don't want the state of California or Florida or the government to get involved, be proactive, have a living trust. Your living trust is going to have your power of attorney. So if someone needs to make decisions for you or your health care, like in my living trust, Shawn, I don't want to be a vegetable. I put in there, I don't want to be a vegetable. So I get to control the narrative as opposed to making my wife the health care, which she probably would try to keep me around as long as possible. But depending on the situation, we all get to have our wishes. And so most of our wishes are we want our bank accounts and our personal residence and everything to go, to our children. And so that revocable living trust will have the power of attorney, your health care, and then the last will and testament. So anything inside of there will avoid probate. Now, what's really cool within your group, so in those two trusts that we do, but in either trust, you can actually have language where, let's say, they're setting up these policies with you. We can have it to where 50% of the proceeds get allocated to the beneficiaries each year, and then 50% goes back into the trust. So basically, that trust lives on forever and ever. So now the policy can continue to grow. Your kids, your grandkids can be taken care of. And so that is called dynasty family bank language within a revocable living trust. The problem, though, I like to point out, and I have to tell people right now, a lot of you probably have a will because a lot of attorneys advertise, set up a will. A will is bullshit. It still will go through probate court, which frustrates me because attorneys should tell you that. A lot of attorneys that set up the wills know that when that family member dies, that person is going to probably come back to them to represent them in probate court. And a living trust is considerably cheaper than what my cousin went through last year. His parents died. They didn't own a business, a bank account. They owned one home, and he called 23 law firms in Nevada, and the cheapest retainer he could find was 10 grand. So, and again, all they had was one house. So they were 2 months behind on the mortgage. By the time he was done grieving, hiring the guy, he lost 10 grand and he lost the property. So he lost 160,000. This kid lives paycheck to paycheck. I felt so bad for him. It would have been a good opportunity for him to have a little nest egg. But because the parents didn't have a living trust, because he got started in the probate process too late, they lost that house that they had owned since 1987. And it was just devastating because it should have stayed in the family. He should have been able to capitalize on the parents. You know, they're his parents from over the years, but because they didn't have a living trust, the bank foreclosed, took advantage, kept the money. It was really nasty. Now, the problem with the living trust, though, is there's no protection inside of it, Shawn. So anything inside of a revocable living trust can actually be taken while we're alive. So a lot of times we'll have our clients put their personal residence in there and have them homestead it where they live. You can list your Apple Watch, your Rolex, or your wedding rings. You put that in your trust, assign it to your kids, grandkids, whoever. Now, there's a Nevada Asset Protection Trust, which is an irrevocable trust that allows revocable privileges. So anything that you put inside of this trust after a 2-year look back period is protected from any type of creditor or any type of litigator. So like my stock of my company, Corporate Capital, which is a pretty decent sized company, I have the shares of my stock in the MJ Audit Trust for Michael Jordan. I'm a MJ fan, so I did an MJ Audit Trust that owns the shares of my multi-million-dollar business. It owns the shares of my holding company. It owns the shares of the Carlson Family Circus, Mac Holdings, MJ Audit and Consulting. All of that, instead of being in my name, is in my trust. So if I ever get sued personally, Shawn, I don't have to list that I own a $4 million company or $1 million building or whatever my portfolio or your portfolio looks like, because I control everything, but on paper, I don't own it because it's owned by this asset protection trust. So you and I have talked about that, where a lot of times when people will set up their policies, they'll use one of these two trusts as the beneficiary. So now when that grantor, the owner of the policy, passes away, now everything is going to go verbatim to the language of this trust. And if your goals or your client's goals are to have the generational wealth, then we'll have the trust where you tell us how much you would want allocated each year to the kids or how much back into the policy. And then I have half my clients that when they die, they want the death benefit to be paid and just have everything go to their children and grandchildren. But either way, that's your decision if you take these steps. And so, you know, at my age, I'm 43. I started my trust, obviously, both of them before or roughly around the same time I started my business, because number one, I knew the importance. I didn't even own my personal residence at the time, but I knew that once I bought those things, I wanted to have the vehicles, whether it was LLCs or trusts, to put those appropriate assets in. So again, from business assets to real estate to patents, trademarks, guns, cash, you put that kind of stuff in this irrevocable asset protection trust. And then your jewelry, your personal residence, your power of attorney, you and your wife or spouse being able to make decisions for each other, and then putting one of the kids in charge when you die of the estate as the executor, then they will have to follow exactly what your wishes were. And without any of this, it's the wild, wild west. The kids can fight. There could be infighting. I just tell parents they're going to grieve enough. So it's better for us to just make sure that we have this document that says, hey, my dad's leaving the Corvette to Brent. He's leaving his Rolex to Mitchell. We all know that, but it's outlined inside of his trust. And I would encourage all of you, even if you only own a house, some people don't think they're rich enough for a living trust. I say bullshit to that. Everyone, if you have something that you want to leave, you don't want to hire an attorney, you don't want to wait 12 to 18 months for the probate process to play out, then just take the 15, 20 minutes and set up the living trust. And that's what I really would encourage you to do. And to kind of recap everything, what makes us unique, and the reason why Shawn had asked me to come on is, we do most of this right under one roof. Our CPAs, our attorneys, myself as a consultant, Flo, Jamie, like we all know what we're doing. So we know what the structure is. We know what tax advice you've been given. We know what estate planning structure may make sense for you. So a lot of people like that one-stop shop mentality. But again, I have had many conversations. I've been doing this 20 years. Half of you will take the information and maybe talk to your accountant. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure you guys have the information and the topics and the options available to you so we can make the best decision. Because some people don't care about asset protection. And then other people I talk about care about that more than the tax savings. So again, we'll try to put together the right structure and approach for you to accomplish those goals. Because if you're trying to buy a house in 2025, then we're probably going to want you to beef up the bottom line and not write off everything. So again, depending on our clients' goals year in and year out, we look at it from like a structuring point of view. We look at it from a tax point of view. It's not the same every single year just because you've been working with us 11 years. We may want to look at adding some of these pieces or doing some of these tax planning strategies.
Yeah, man. And I think at the end of the day, I really appreciate you coming on because it's like we talk about with the infinite banking stuff. All we're here for is to get people the right information. Because if we can help you get educated, then you'll be able to make the decision that's best for you. At least that's what the hope is. So whether it's teaching you about whole life insurance and its uses through infinite banking, whether it's asset protection, whether it's the ways that you can kind of utilize the tax codes and get money back. Like it's just things that aren't being taught to the normal person that are being used by, again, the wealthy. Like I'm sure you roll in a little bit higher circle than I do, and I'm sure that a lot of the people that you know with money are implementing these type of things in their lives because that's what they've been taught to do by other people with money. And so we just want to get people that opportunity to learn how they can start doing these things too. And as you start to grow your wealth, then these are the things you like to add into your repertoire, into your tool belt.
Well, one thing I want to mention about the irrevocable trust, again, I have one, a lot of my clients have one. Um, it is something that it takes a few weeks to put together, and then once it's put together, you want to get it signed and notarized as soon as possible, so we could try to have that 2-year look back period start. So, like the stock of my companies that's been in there, if I ever get sued personally, if they've been in there for 2 years, I don't have to list that I own the shares of corporate capital, which again is it's a pretty big business. So if something happens to me, I have my Mac Holdings owns our building that we're in. Corporate capital is the main operation. We have MJ Audit and Consulting because we do reviews and audits, so we want to separate that liability from our day-to-day. So if someone slips and falls in our lobby, they can't go after my main business, they can't go after my review business. If someone sues corporate capital, they can't go after my building, they can't go after those other assets. So again, I'm just big on separating. Obviously, if we keep everything in our name, then the taxes we have to pay everything as an individual sole proprietorship, and the flip side of that is if it's in your name you're liable. And so I think people would be surprised how nominal it is to actually set up an entity and to maintain it every year. And if you have those questions before making a decision, we have no problem having you call and say, hey, how much is it, what would it cost to renew, and you can hang up on us. Literally, I don't care. I just want to make sure you guys have that opportunity. And if you do have questions, like I said, Flo, Turnus, Jamie, and myself are plan on speaking to everyone that comes in from Shawn's group. And then I have 3 administrative assistants here at the company. I'm kind of old school with my follow-up and the way we communicate with people. I'm not hiding behind computers and technology, even though we can. So I have 3 assistants. You guys could reach out to that number directly. It would ring to all of us and the 3 partners. Or If you wanted to email Shawn, if you would like to share with your group or maybe somewhere in the header, Taylor, Kaylee, and Jocelyn's email, my three assistants. I know you have that information, I believe. Or do you want me to give that now?
You can give it now, and then I'll also
Okay.
put it in the
Well,
description.
yeah, and just so everyone knows, the email is all the same as far as at corpcapinc.com. So it's short for Corporate Capital Incorporated. So mine is Brent, Brent, at corpcapinc.com, and that's corpcapinc.com. So Brent at corpcapinc.com. Then we have Taylor, Taylor. Then we have Kaylee, Kailey. And then Jocelyn as well, Jocelyn. And they all have at corpcapinc.com. If anyone does email, I'll be traveling to Salt Lake tomorrow. I'm not sure when this will play, if it's live or not. But next week I'll be back, and I'd be happy to, do individual consultations with anyone who wants to speak with me directly. Please, if I'm not available and it's urgent, don't be afraid to talk to Jamie and Flo. They're just as knowledgeable and have been doing this just as long as I have. I'm fortunate to work with Shawn directly. He's referred me family members, friends. So, I wanted to do this as far as the face of the company. But if you talk to any of us three, you guys will be in good hands. They know that it's just more of an educational platform. We're going to answer your questions, and then we'll leave you alone after that. We're not the kind of company. Shawn can probably tell you, like, I won't stalk you or follow up with you. Like, it either makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And that's the luxury of my business. People, it clicks and it's like, yeah, I need this, or I need to put this in my goals, and we follow up later, or it just doesn't make sense. And hey, you got the education, got some questions answered, and you move forward. But that's the most important thing in this day and age. We live in a country, and I know we're running over, I'll make it quick. Lawsuits and lottery are the two fastest way to get rich. They don't want to, I got a sign right here in my office. 97% who quit are employed by the 3% that never gave up. And it's true. It takes a special person to build that wealth, to do this. I talked to a kid yesterday, 26. He's starting this infinite life. He's starting the policies. He knows it's really not going to benefit him. He goes, you know what? I'm tired of my family living freaking paycheck to paycheck. I'm tired of what we've done for 200 years. It's got to start somewhere. I might not benefit from it, but guess what? My grandkids will. I'll leave that legacy. I'm like, I love that shit. 26, 27-year-old kid. And he knew that I was like, hopefully you get to experience some benefit later on in your life. But he's like, it's got to start somewhere. And I'm a big believer. We do hundreds of, I hope Shawn's okay with me sharing this, but we do hundreds of tax returns for like this group, Money Multiplier, Money School, Private Money Club, Shawn. So we're very familiar with infinite banking. We're very familiar with real estate. I'll be attending a few events with those groups here in February and March. So hopefully some of you will be there. But yeah, no, I really appreciate this opportunity, Shawn. I definitely wanted to be sure to cover the LLCs because that is something that everyone should consider, especially if they do have like a side business or consulting. It may be a good a way to just offset some of their income, even if they don't have a true business. And then obviously, if we have a true business and we're not taking advantage of some of the things that I mentioned, then someone needs to have a conversation, either corporate capital or the team that you guys have in place right now, in my opinion.
Definitely. Well, I greatly appreciate the information, man. Again, with my situation, it was just not knowing, and once you know, you're like, oh, this just sounds like something that I should be implementing in my life. And like Brett said, you don't have to do it all at once. It doesn't have to be this, that, and the other thing. But I know a lot of people, this is on their list of things to do, and shit never gets done unless you do it. So, you know,
Yeah.
put it on the top of your list, make it a priority, have the conversation, see if it makes sense and everything, and then put something in place, because the best plan is a plan that is going to play out. And that's
Well,
again,
let
life
me
is
share one more thing too. 'Cause for those of you who have a good CPA or accountant, obviously you're probably not looking to switch. Totally cool with that. But ask them, depending on how you guys are structured, if you took consistent distributions last year by chance, let's say $1,000 or $2,000 checks here and there, there's a way that you can count that towards the Augusta Rule in some cases. So I would really encourage you guys to have that conversation if you paid yourself, consistently, even if it's 4 or 5 pay periods where you gave yourself $1,500 or 2 grand, we could possibly uh, put that towards the Augusta Rule, which means you wouldn't have to claim that as income tax. So I would recommend having that conversation either with them or with my team, whoever you guys feel most comfortable with. And again, that phone number is the 855-410-7667. That will ring to me, Flo, Jamie, and then Kaylee, Jocelyn, and Taylor. So between the three of us, we'll either take the call live, or if one of my assistants gets on, we would just schedule a call. We'll do anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour consultation. And again, I'm not going to stress this anymore. You guys will see when we have that opportunity. Probably similar conversations to Shawn, very laid back. It is what it is. Here's what we can do. And we'd be happy to provide you that education, because that's what this man asked me to do for his group, just to make sure that they know what their options are and let them make the decision from there. So I really appreciate the opportunity, Shawn. Obviously, I'd love to hear from many of you, and if not, take that education, get to your team, find out what changes can be made, if any, and then obviously start doing some of that proactive estate planning if you haven't done that yet. Whether you're 33, 43, 27, or 91, like, I really encourage you to get it done, because the longer we wait, especially like my clients in their 90s now, I got to get their house in there, I got to get their bank accounts, like, we're scrambling. So it just makes sense to kind of do things in stages. And the last thing I'll say is living trust used to be like $700 when I started in 2005. They're not even close to that anymore. Everything's relevant. You guys wait 20, 30 years to do your living trust, which is a document the states and government tells you have to have. It's only going to go up like houses and everything else, but you don't have to update your living trust every 10 years. It doesn't expire or go bad. You just have to have it. So there's no time like the present, in my opinion. I don't think you'll find it cheaper than what is going on right now in the world. And obviously 10, 15 years from now, everything's going to be relevant, but it's not like an LLC where you have to renew it every year or pay for a fee. Matter of fact, we don't even charge our clients for amendments. So if we happen to do the living trust for you, anytime you need to change the beneficiary, a kid passes away, you want to add a new family member, you're able to edit those, and we don't charge you for that. We just want to make sure, again, your LLC is always in compliance, your estate planning is lined up the way you want it for that day of passing, which is really shitty to think about, but it's inevitable. So we have to have that conversation. You know what I mean?
Yep, yep, it definitely is. So get you guys ducks in order, and like I said, they've been great to work with. Everybody over at CorpCap has been fantastic. So
Thank you.
again, the information's free. Reach out to them. But Brent, greatly appreciate your time, man, and
Of course.
have a safe trip out there to Utah tomorrow, and we'll be connecting again soon. But I'll catch you guys on the next episode.
All right. Thank you again. I appreciate it. Have a good one, everyone.
All right, peace, man.